I work here at the Utah State Board of Education, and I am the Autism and Significant Cognitive Disabilities Specialist. And I'm here for this community of practice around alternate diploma with Tracy Gooley, who is our Special Education Assessment Specialist, and you'll be hearing from her, and of course, Lavinia Gripentrag, who is our post-secondary transition specialist. And so I'm just going to kind of get the ball rolling today. If you, I don't know how many people we have joining us today, but I know Lavinia is recording this, so we can share it as well. But if you have not been a part of our COP before, we're just going to really try to dedicate some time to sharing with you some information and get some discussion going. But it's important to us that you sign in. And just this helps inform our practice as we move forward about who was here and taking part in this, and also who else we might want to consider inviting next go around. So if you can sign in with the link that's on there, and then or just through the QR code, as well as just putting it in your chat. And Tracy has changed the, yeah, that's what it kind of looks like.
So the link is now in the chat, I believe, right? You just got that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how we're going to spend our time this afternoon. The agenda today, again, if you've been a part of our, our discussion and meeting before, is to really support you in your work regarding the alternate diploma. And so we want to just review the purpose of what we're doing here today, give you some resources during the last community of practice meeting. There was some questions and discussion about special education course codes. So that's going to be our main focus today. And then also, obviously, we'll wrap up as we are, and you are ending the school year. And so we're going to talk about moving forward, if we're going to continue with this or do something different. So that's what our plan is for this afternoon. So again, the purpose of the alternate diploma, and before I get into that, I just want to say, just remember, a community of practice is really not us to throw information at you. Of course, it has to do with us providing you with those resources, but it really does have to do with you as a team, whoever's here, discussing what your knowledge is, your questions are, what information you want further. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. But when we talk about the alternate diploma, the purpose of it, there's several purposes, but the first one that we want to touch base on is really that it is a validation of that progress of our students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, and those kiddos that have been, or young adults that have been receiving instruction through the essential elements, and acknowledging those accomplishments. We still have some of those students that get that certificate of completion, but for some students, for parents, for their teachers, this might feel like a better way of, or more, as we said, like a more celebrated way of acknowledging those accomplishments. And then it does really provide that meaningful participation in the student's educational program. And we're going to talk about course codes and what it looks like, again, more than you guys have already discussed in our COP, about what it means to get that alternate diploma, and what that, and how that can increase the post-school outcomes. And then we really want to make sure, and Tracy, Lavinia, and I were all in a conversation yesterday with one of our colleagues here that was working with a school district that still was not making that connection that a student can get an alternate diploma and still continue to get that free, appropriate public education. So when a student gets that alternate diploma, it does not end FAPE, and it's very important that everybody on the team is aware of that consideration when we're looking at our students getting the alternate diploma. And really, again, we're focusing on those post-high services. on what transition services are needed to best achieve their goals in employment, education, training, and independent living. And I think we were talking yesterday, Lavinia, we've had the alternate diploma, I think, for about since
2018.
2018.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're really hoping to make things more clear for those of you that are working with these students and what that might mean for them, in their post-high school services.
And I think messaging that to parents as well,
Exactly.
making sure that also school counselors are well versed in explaining the alternate diploma, right? Because that question might come their way as well.
Yes. Okay. So I think Tracy's going to talk about a couple things here.
Yeah. So, and I don't know, Lavinia, if you have any of these up to drop in the chat or not, but here's our resources that we currently have available. So those of you that have joined us on any of these other community of practice calls previously, there is not really a whole lot of guidance at the federal level around the requirements or implementation for the alternate diploma. So we don't have a whole lot going on, but we have got an updated frequently asked questions document around the alternate diploma, and we do have we've updated the alternate diploma requirements and course options document this year, and there is some information in the graduation guidelines for students with disabilities. But I wanted to take a look at this alternate diploma graduation requirements and course code options because our kind of topic today was going to sit around course code. So I put that link directly to that in the chat. And so kind of this was what was the driving force around getting a community of practice started was as we kind of started digging a little bit more into what was going on with courses. It was LEAs across the state had a whole gambit of how many courses students were receiving credit in, earning an alt diploma. And so really most of the guidance that we have around this is sits here in this R27705 around that an alternate diploma. It is awarded to students, should be with the most significant cognitive disabilities, and they are receiving their access, grade level core access through the essential elements. Students' IEP teams can make graduation substitutions in the same content area or from a list of alternative courses approved by a superintendent, and that the student meets all graduation requirements before exiting at or before age 22. And that it may not indicate that the recipient is a student with a disability when they earn that alternate diploma. And that LEAs are still obligated to provide FAPE to those eligible students underneath IDEA. And so with that, it was intended that an alternate diploma does have alignment to a state's regular diploma. And so when we talk about that alignment, came in the required course credits. And so we discovered that there were some LEAs that students were earning an alternate diploma and they had those full 24, sometimes 26 credits, depending on what your LEA's graduation requirements were. And then we found students who had earned an alternate diploma with 8 or 10 course credits, or sometimes even 6. So the intent was that our students are still receiving instruction in alignment with the regular diploma. And so these would be the number of credits that we would expect them to earn and in the areas. However, with the caveat that IEP teams can make course substitutions and or even graduation substitutions. So that was kind of what led us down this path of opening up and talking about what are you guys doing for courses and enrollment for our kiddos that are receiving alternate diploma. And so as you move further in this document, you can see here, so we only have essential elements aligned to those core academic areas in which we provide year-end summative accountability assessments. And so that would be English language arts, mathematics, and science. So those are actually the only 3 areas that we are required underneath IDEA and ESSA to have alternate achievement standards. And so you can see here where our students under an alternate diploma, to earn that, they could be enrolled in an essential elements course, or they could be enrolled in a regular special education course, or they could be enrolled in a gen ed course. So that's really what this intent was, to just kind of put that out there, that you can substitute an essential elements course for any of those other special education or core courses, with the expectation that we're still receiving those 3 credits. And same thing with science. However, if we scroll back up to the top, I think some of what our intent was that where we also have 3 credits required for social studies or health education or PE, all of these other courses that students would be accessing that instruction through any of our other special ed courses, or even the core course with appropriate adaptations, modifications, or maybe even like actual course substitutions. So I guess that's where we kind of open it up to you guys to kind of engage in the discussion around what you are doing in core codes. And I gotta swap this. For those of you that are awarding the alternate diploma. So our first question to kind of lead out the conversation today was, how are you currently using course codes?
And I think we're small enough that folks could unmute, or you could use the chat, but feel free to unmute.
We would love to hear from you.
I talked about this a little bit in our last meeting, but we use those course codes for the essential elements classes, the math, language arts, and science. And then is what we've done for our EE teachers specifically is found the special education course code for the social studies, like world geography, world history, health, and those classes. And those are the codes they use for their other periods that they teach, so that if students need to take world history from their essential elements teacher, they still can and still have it show up with the correct code without having to do a substitution. We encourage all of our students to take it in the gen ed setting first, or have the team talk about it. And if they can't do it that way, then what are those next pieces on the continuum that we would look at, all the way down to participating in that class with their essential elements teacher.
Thanks, Nick. I think Tracy's trying to show you some info.
She's trying to show the course code document, but I think she's having
You guys
trouble
see it?
scrolling it. Yeah,
I
we
can see
can
it.
see you, but we see like your whole browser. But yeah, now you're scrolling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's
So
where I
it's-
went in and found those course codes. Yeah.
Right.
Right. So not necessarily the essential elements, but like
Another special ed course code for like that example you gave around social studies. But I like how you mentioned that we first look at, can the student fulfill this requirement in the gen ed? Because I think that would be preferred if possible. So certainly just because a student is on path to earn the alternate diploma doesn't mean you have to be using the special ed course code. Students can take all of the requirements actually, right, in a gen ed setting with support, with modifications, with collaboration with the gen ed teacher. So I just want to make sure that that is clear. But thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I didn't know. There we go. Oh, did you already put that in? No. Okay, there's a link to that document.
Okay,
So I don't know
thanks.
if you guys were aware that we did have this course code document. And so where this lives, just so you're aware, is on our special education web page under programs. You go down to post-secondary transition and graduation. And under guidelines is where you're going to find the graduation guidelines for students with disabilities, special ed course codes. Here's the alternate diploma stuff and the career developmental credential information. And so that is on the special education website under secondary transition and graduation, and then guidelines is where we find all of that information. Oh, and I lost. Go back to it, I guess. There we go. Okay.
Yep.
So thanks, Nick. Anybody else have any other information to kind of share what they've been doing, how they've been tackling it?
Robin's got her hand up. Go ahead, Robin.
Hi, it's Robin. So we at the School for the Blind at Bridges, we're a a specialized school. But one thing that just made it helpful to just organize everything is I did make a spreadsheet similar to what the other document you were just showing us, so that side by side I show all the graduation requirements, and then I have all the codes listed there. So I have a column for general ed, the special ed codes, and the essential element code. And I'm just sharing this because when I have to do so many different levels of students, having them all together in a master document, I know has made it really easy for me. And then in those classes where there's not an essential element code, I already have, well, what are the classes? What is the description? And what are, modifications or accommodations that we can use? And one of the reasons why we were really passionate about this is because we wanted students' transcripts to also reflect the type of diploma that they were getting. So I wholeheartedly agree with what Nick and everyone just said about trying in the general ed environment first. Since we don't have that at our school, I wanted students to have a transcript that matches what their diploma is, so that it was aligned and it was reflective of that. So that was really helpful. And then if we created our own course codes for specialized instruction, that also lists there. And so it lists the course description. So I think that was just really helpful for everybody who's just trying to juggle all the course codes, was to have a master document of all the codes in one place. Very helpful.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So we have someone that's asking if that's something you could share with the community.
I would be willing. Let me go back and look at it just to make sure there's nothing like special. But if
Right.
I find something, yeah, does that make sense? I didn't know a great way of saying it, but I am more than happy to share out that document.
Great. And you can email that to me, Robin, and I can, with your permission, share that out.
Sure, that'd be great.
Anybody else?
We had a few more questions, right, on that slide. Do we want to go back
Yes.
and
Okay.
look at that?
So let's see what was next. Okay. So our next question. Okay. So
This is
this
Tracy.
is the loaded question, friends. Do you think that the essential elements course codes are necessary for alternate diploma? Just kind of curious what your thoughts are around that, or just in general. So
I
like
feel like I'm
if
talking a lot. Oh,
no,
No,
you're
that's
go
all
ahead.
right.
That's why you're here. That's why you're here.
I do think they're necessary and they're useful, because then it, like we talked about, it gives more legitimacy to our programs and what we're teaching, and to make the diploma more legitimate for parents and for like programs like Aggies Elevated and Wolverines Elevated. And it just makes it easier, I think, for our students to be able to participate and feel like they are doing the same thing that their peers are doing, whether it is the same classes or not.
So out of curiosity, Nick, if you used just those special education courses that we have for ELA, math, and science, kind of like you do for history, would that meet the need as well?
I think it could. Is where it would get tricky, at least for us, is our like resource students would be could potentially then be assigned to take that class from an essential elements teacher who might be teaching it in a different way or might not be going as deep or as wide, right? The way we look at like the essential elements in math and science with the way they relate to the core is that would be my concern is are they getting the full they'll get the full class, but getting it in the way that they would if they were getting it from another special education teacher in that specific area.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. And then I think Robin.
Yeah, Robin, go ahead.
I agree with what Nick just shared. I think they are useful. Again, it kind of goes back to the comment that I made. I prefer using them because I want to show alignment to if this is their diploma, then this is how we were fulfilling it. And with the caveat that there's not the range of course codes that we have for special education or even our general education codes. But when possible, I'd like to do that because we are supporting students to go onto the programs, like Nick mentioned about going to any of the elevated programs. We want their transcripts to be valid and we want to show that alignment and that they were in real classes, that, they were legitimately addressing the same type of standards and content in the most appropriate way for these particular students. So I like to do it just to support and recognize their unique needs and that this is a dignified way of doing it.
Okay. Perfect. It looks like, was it Laurel at one? I thought maybe Laurel was going to say something. Anybody else? Thoughts on the essential elements courses?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but feel free to unmute if you want to either ask a question or offer, your thoughts around these questions. Can't remember if we had a third question on here, do we?
Maybe.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question really quick around that? Are you
Absolutely.
considering removing the EE course code?
So,
is that why you're asking?
right? I think some of the conversation has been had at the table. We know that we've got sometimes the course codes, those essential elements course codes not being used appropriately. We do have some LEAs that have taken that and thought they were remedial courses, and gen ed students have been enrolled in them. And so we do have some troubles with that piece of it. I think I couldn't tell you 100% why they were created. I do know that I think early on folks thought that DLM was going to require these essential elements courses for rostering enrollment, and that is not the case. Because we can have students enrolled in a gen ed course, right? We can push that instruction into a gen ed setting under a resource course. And so, in fact, we really don't use the essential elements courses for any, I guess, compliance or tracking components at USBE. The only thing that we use to determine that a student takes alternate assessments and if they need an alternate diploma is the 1% flag in the SIS system.
Okay.
And so we thought about, do we still have a need for it? Would it make more sense? And especially in our world of inclusive practices and all the things, do we just stick with those, go back to those special ed courses? And knowing that, let's see if I can get out of this. So for example, let's see, where are they specific ones? Like ELA, those are essential elements, but these ones. And so any special education license is qualified to teach any of these courses.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So you don't
Yeah.
have to have A complex support needs endorsement or severe endorsement or mild endorsement. So like the only requirement is having a special license.
Now for math, though, I'm obviously secondary 1, 2, and 3 does require highly qualified math, but we have other math codes, correct, Tracy, that they could use if that were the case, like if essential elements course codes were to go away.
They
No.
just changed the height thing.
And I think they did, and I
Oh,
don't
they
think
did.
They just
Okay.
changed
I don't
it.
think the special ed math ones do.
Okay.
But yeah.
That's news to me.
Just
So-
like-
I have
They
a
don't
question about
anymore?
that.
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
So I understand that the special ed courses and the essential element courses basically require a special educator. So I just want to, as far as we're talking about course codes, there's also, that's usually tied to the licenses. So if there's something they're taking essential elements science, that person would still have to have a degree in science or licensure in science. Is that correct? Or licensure in mathematics or licensure in whatever the course may be that's outside of ELA? Is that the same requirement for EE courses as it is for all other courses that we have?
Are you talking the like core codes, like gen ed core
Yeah.
codes outside of our special education?
Well, yeah. So I know, like, for example, if my teacher wants to teach financial lit, there has to be some qualification or licensure in financial lit, even though they're teaching, say, a deaf ed, in my class, in my situation, a deaf ed classroom. Is that the same for the essential elements? Is that
Nope.
the same requirement?
Nope.
Not the same requirement.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
And-
And
So
special
any
ed
of-
courses, do they do that for the special ed courses as well?
Nope. Nope. And so
Okay.
any of our special ed courses that start with either, so the big code is the 22 or 23. 23 is our essential
Mhm.
elements. And then I think 22, I have to double check. I was just talking to Kristen about this yesterday. So no, any of our special ed courses, whether it's essential elements or these special ed courses, the teacher of record, the requirement to be the teacher of record for that course is a special education license, period.
But it doesn't define which type of license,
Nope.
right?
Nope. Nope.
Cross-cutting.
But you are
That's very
correct.
helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you are correct, Michelle, in that if I want my teacher, right, to be a teacher of record and to be able to be a teacher of record to that financial literacy course, they have to have that course's qualifications to teach it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do they have a financial lit course? Is that a thing?
I don't think
No,
Since
we,
that's a
course
required
for-
course for graduation, do they
It
do they
is.
have something for those sped students that are for financial lit? Does that exist?
No, I don't think so. I'm looking through. I'm trying not to make you sick. So,
So in
no.
that case, they
I-
would
I
have
just-
never
to
found
I just
one.
look-
substitute.
I
right?
just look
Or-
away. I just look away. You're done.
So this is where things get kind of interesting. So no, we don't have like a financial literacy course. However, you're back to that notion of IEP teams can make course substitutions. And so depending on what you've got going, right?
So
I
let me
mean,
play that out. A
that's-
course
there's only-
substitution. Can
Sorry, I was
can
gonna
I play
say
that out
is
just a little bit?
Since there's only 3 required math classes, that 4th year of math, that their senior year for our EE students, we use as a substitution for financial lit if they can't do the class
Oh, that's,
with
yeah,
their
Mm.
gen ed peers with para support or peer tutor support
that
or
makes sense.
independently.
That does make sense.
Suppose I wanted to teach, for example, financial lit. I want financial lit for my EE students or my students but I know they're not be able to take the financial lit class with the other kids. But I do want to teach them at their level some financial lit. Is there latitude to say that the special ed teacher is teaching the financial lit class, or does that mean that I have does my special ed teacher have to go get qualified to teach financial lit and then adjust it and alter it I mean, in my school, there isn't another teacher teaching financial lit other than my
Right.
teachers,
Well, I mean, I think that
right?
would be a
So
choice if they wanted to get, have the qualifications or the endorsement. I guess that's possible, but it's not needed. So like you could, for example, use a course code. I think there's some that are around transition skills listed on there. You could life skills, right? So you could use those course codes and then just on the IEP document that you are substituting that for financial lit and then create whatever that adapted sort of curriculum is, just using
I
a
wouldn't
course code
I
that's
wouldn't create it.
related.
Yeah, I wouldn't create a course code for financial lit for my special
Right.
ed
No,
students.
no,
So
I
they've
would just
got,
find
yeah.
one that makes the most sense. And I think like life skills, transition skills, and I don't have them all memorized, but I would look at this list and see which one, kind of lends itself, right, to that financial lit type of content
Maybe.
and
Okay.
choose that one. Maybe applied skills, right? I think
Yeah.
there's some flexibility here, and IEP teams would just document then that the financial lit
So,
course is
there it is.
substituted with one of those others.
Right. Designed to provide
Yeah.
accessible
I am
literacy.
working on other things to try to get specific course codes for deaf ed since my teacher, we
Okay.
have unique
And so then
circumstances,
that
but
makes sense.
I was curious. This helps feed that discussion for me. Thank you.
Okay.
I think where you get kind of tricky and squishy with it is with the regular diploma, right? When you're awarding that regular diploma and when you've got a lot of course substitutions, but I mean that's the hard part though, is because then at the end of the day, IEP teams can. But
I just think we have to be careful really with, in the context of a regular diploma, right? Like knowing what the student's transition plan says, what are their plans for after exit, how is that going to impact them if there's a lot of substitutions. And I think that's probably fair to say too for the alternate diploma, depending on what is the student's post-secondary plan. So I think we always have to take this into consideration and think about what's on their transition plan and what is their plan after exit. So hopefully that helps. But Alyssa, you've got your hand up next.
I have a question kind of shifting gears just for a second. What is the proper way to awarding an alternate diploma? I have a senior who, well, super senior, who has finished all of her credits necessary to receive the alternate diploma, but she is going to continue with us this next school year. Sorry, I have background noise. But is it kosher to give her her diploma and then continue to teach her until she ages out? Or would
I'm glad you asked that question.
or
I
would
mean,
it have
ideally,
to finish out
after
and
or
out?
yeah, no, I would say, I mean, really the way that we intended this is that they would earn it in their cohort year. It's not required. There is a way that students can earn it in subsequent years after their cohort. But ideally, and by all means, if the student has met all the requirements in their senior year, then yes, award it. Use that GA code as a high school completion status code, which is graduate alternate. And then that goes into, your SIS system, into our UTREC system, and then they can absolutely come back for post-high services up until they reach that maximum age of eligibility. So that would definitely be, I think, the preferred way. Now, if a student is in their senior year and they are short on credits, or maybe they've missed some school, or they need more time to earn that alternate diploma, then you have the ability to readjust that student's cohort if you use the correct retained senior code, which is RA, not RT. And RA, again, they have to have the 1% flag, because this is only for a student with most significant cognitive disabilities, and you are essentially reassigning them to the next year's cohort. And that can be used in subsequent years if it doesn't get skipped at all. So in other words, if the student needs 2 more post-high years, then you would want to use the RA code, those 2 years, and then you can award the alternate diploma. But you don't have to wait until they reach that maximum age of eligibility or their last year of post-high, for example. We definitely encourage that you award it when they earn it, and ideally that would be in 12th grade. Does that help, Jalissa?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think, Lisa, that tags onto your question, what becomes that completion code then in those subsequent years. So once they have then completed their credits to earn that alternate diploma, then you use the GA code. And so what we do is, let's say they're going to earn it in that that first year of post-high, right? So like their,
Fifth year kind of.
fifth year, if you
yeah,
will.
yeah.
So when they go to in their 12th grade year, you use RA, return alternate diploma, ensure the 1% flag is set. And then for state accountability purposes, not for federal, for state accountability, that lets us know we are taking that student's graduation cohort and we're now going to move it to the next year. So if that student comes back and enrolls and now they complete their course credits in that fifth year, we're saying that now that is their graduation cohort year. Then they earn that diploma. You give them a GA, graduate alternate, and they're counted as a graduate for state accountability, not federal, in that year, and then they can continue post-high. Oh, once they use the GA code their senior year, to continue to return from year to year. Is that what it is, Lisa?
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. So let's say they earn the alternate diploma in their senior year, so that they can come back that following year, but then they're going to come 3 more years, let's say, for post-high. Then you could continue to then use the RT code because they truly are a retained senior at that point. You wouldn't use the RA again because you've already awarded them the graduate alternate and you're not moving their cohort anymore, right? But they're still eligible for those post-high services. So you would just then use the regular RT code after they've been awarded that, all the way up until they age out and then use the age out code in the end. Yeah. So hopefully that's helpful.
Is that in our?
I didn't
We
know
need to
that
double
either.
check that.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah. We'll have to double check to make sure that's wherever. I think maybe a frequently asked questions document we might want to look at. Yeah,
that's a good one.
That's a great question though. And if you ever have any questions about codes, honestly, like please reach out because it does get confusing. And so, there are no there are no questions that we, don't anticipate you needing to know. So please reach out. Suzanne, do you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, so I just want to jump back to the conversation with the math of personal finance. So what we've done in our district is for those students who are EE kids or DLM kids, whatever you want to call it, they're DLM with us, Essential Elements kids. We have created a class called Math. Well, it's not created, but it's coded. It's a state code, Math of Decision Making. And we just take and we follow the guidelines for that, but it's a 2-trimester class that aligns very much like the Math of Personal Finance. And so we've used that course for a substitution that fits really nicely. We also have a team taught Math of Personal Finance and Financial Literacy class.
Do you know what the actual core code itself is? So I don't know if you guys were aware of that, but so for example, Suzanne could say, we're going to use this learning strategies code, but she's going to change the name of it.
I don't know what the actual state code is, but I can tell you what our district code is.
It's probably aligned to a state code. It should be in order to count. It has to.
And we're talking a general education course code, correct? This is one of those. Yeah, that's what I thought. This is like an applied option, I think, for that, that third year of math. Yeah.
I can tell it to you right now if you want me to.
I'd just be curious.
45066.
45066.
Can you put that in the chat?
Yes.
Thank you.
And then, like I said, we also have we do the team taught Math of Financial Literacy also, which has worked really well for a lot of students who need a little more support. So again, I don't know what's with the camera that's blocking out, but so it's that 20-10 kind of ratio. And then we have a special ed teacher in there, math teacher that also teaches it with the core teacher. Let's see.
I think we removed those applied. What did we do? We said.
Yeah, what's
Oops.
out here? I think, yeah, we probably have to reference back to graduation,
6.
regular high school graduation requirements. Yeah, it's that.
Let me just
Okay,
double
don't follow
check
it
to
down
make
because it
sure.
goes to the rule. It's this current core code, the second one down. Mhm.
And I know that this wasn't done lightly, like there was a lot of effort and thought put into what we went as we were creating alignments and making sure that we were covering all our bases. There was a lot of conversations back and forth to make sure we were crossing all our I or
Yeah.
dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's.
So I'm wondering if it's this one. So interesting here. It's right. Mathematics of personal finance does not count for general finance lit. However, an IEP team could determine.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. Like
Yeah.
just a general ed student was taking it, we couldn't do that. But
Right.
because we as a district felt that it was aligned enough to what the math of finance or the financial literacy class is, that it fit really well. And then they just make sure that they talk about all of those things that they do in financial literacy also.
Right. Right. Interesting. So there's multiple ways, right? There's not, I mean, Lavinia, there's not like a right or wrong or a one way to do it. There's multiple ways that you can
Yeah,
engage.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think these are, and I just think that being mindful and thoughtful around the process, like you just described, is definitely, the way to go. And if you had any questions about that, you can always reach out. But I think there absolutely is flexibility. But what you just described, I think, makes a lot of sense and is okay. Yeah.
So Kristen Campbell is our core course guru. Wow, that was a tongue twister. So she's a good one. You can always reach out to Lavinia and I if you're wondering like who qualifies for what, but Kristen Campbell can tell you exactly like if we're thinking of using, for example, right, mathematics of personal finance, what is the license required to be a teacher of record for that or vice versa. And so she's the one that can answer, those things. What is the qualification to be a teacher of record for those courses.
Can I just pop in and just add one?
Mm-hmm.
I think you might have muted yourself again, Renee.
I think she froze.
Did it work?
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there you are.
Okay, sorry.
You're good.
I live out in the boonies, so sometimes our internet's not that great. We're really selective as to the students that go into like the math of decision making. It's a very small class, generally under 10. And a lot of time, and it's typically those, every district calls them something different, but sort of those fence line sitter kids, right? They're really high essential elements, really low resource kiddos that just struggle or need to be pushed a little bit more. The one thing that's really nice is it is a 2-trimester class. And so they can take all of the things that they do in one trimester and extend it out and give them the time for the practice that they need to have a greater understanding of it. But like I say, we're really selective. We want to push kids instead of holding them back. And so we as a team really sit and have some strong conversations about where is the best placement, whether it's this class, whether it's a team talk class, whether it's they're ready to really be pushed out into a gen ed class based on their IEP needs.
Absolutely. I think that is exactly what should be happening for sure.
Yeah, we want to maintain the rigor, where appropriate. Suzanne, we're just curious what LEA you're from, if you don't mind sharing.
Box Elder.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Love it.
All right. Are there any more questions, comments, share outs around this idea of course codes or substituting courses?
I think that was our last question, right, Lavinia?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, and it is helpful to look at the document. You're probably really familiar with the one that Tracy was just sharing, right? But that is. And we have linked to that one because we know that regular ed graduation requirements do change, right, from year to year, like we just had a change with social studies and the government class. And so, make sure that you know where this is and that's available to you. Yeah, do we want to go back then to the slides and see what other questions we have? I think we had a few more.
Well, I think so. I think what I heard robustly from this group, and give me a thumbs up if I got this correct, is that you like having the essential elements courses and you find value, and please don't get rid of them.
Okay, Nick's given a
Nick's a thumb. I know Nick is. Okay, there's a Julissa.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a little
That's
bit of
good
a
feedback,
conversation,
yeah.
but that's why we wanted to ask you guys. Yeah.
To have some feedback on that.
Definitely.
I got,
Thanks,
okay, there's
Nick.
lots
We
of
got it,
thumbs up.
we got
Okay.
it.
All right,
People's attention.
Tracy. I'm gonna get rid of that.
So that takes a meeting off of Tracy's calendar, by the way.
There you go. Okay, cool. Yeah.
So really that kind of just leaves us, we're in our last, few minutes, and we're just really thrilled that folks have responded to this idea of having a community practice around the alternate diploma. And so we thank you for your participation, but we're wondering, what is this going to look like next year, right? Like we're at the end of the school year nearly. And so we're going to kind of throw this out to you guys. Is this something you want to continue next school year? Do you see, value, or do you feel like you've gotten your questions answered? And if so, what might that look like? So how often? We met 3 times this year. We could pivot to 2 next year. We could do a spring and fall, just for example. So I'll just kind of pause there and see if we have any thoughts around that, either in the chat or if folks want to unmute.
I'll just keep talking. I like the idea of continuing to do it because it's nice to bounce these ideas where oftentimes with EE there aren't many of us, even at the district levels, that are focused on this side of things. I think once or twice, or excuse me, twice a year would be good, like a fall and spring or something.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for that feedback. Got some thumbs up, some responses in the chat too.
So the other thought we had, so I was hoping and had took some, put this out at the beginning as you seem, as I wanted to also do a 1% community of practice, kind of around all things 1%, and it just didn't get off the ground this year. So we thought if we got that community of practice happening and maybe even meeting a little bit more regularly,
and embed this into
and we could embed some alt diploma stuff like where needed if that comes up within like just a 1% or alternate assessment community of practice. So like, would that be an option sufficient?
Does that warrant any little more explanation about what you might be covering, in your 1% community practice idea that you had?
Well, it would be all things, right? Combining 1% just to keep with 1% just to keep a day for alt diploma.
Okay.
So we could do that. And again, it wouldn't be like it's, the idea behind community of practices is sometimes like they're very open, they're very flex. We could, shift to whatever conversations need to happen. But I mean, I think we definitely have like new participation criteria to tackle. What do we, how are LEAs, handling all that stuff? But again, if we felt there was a need, even just like, once or twice a year to just hold very specific, like alternate
Topics,
diploma,
maybe.
we could just do that still, right? Kind of run both.
Well, and my thought too with the 1% is like, maybe a little bit of focus of what you guys are doing for instruction, or where like how are you using the DLM resources? Like because we know that that's the thing that comes up a lot. Like DLM has this huge website with so many resources regarding instruction. And like, so I think it could be beneficial. Tracy and I do a lot of professional learning that's pretty targeted around assessment and instruction, but just pulling people together that might want to talk more about, well, here's where our barriers are, here's where we feel like we're succeeding regarding those two areas. I mean, even just the instructionally embedded assessment, like, is anybody using that? Just a chance to talk a little bit about what you're interested in or what's working, or, you know, so I don't think we'd run low on things to chat about.
Yeah, so it looks like in the chat, there's just a lot of chatter about, yes, agreeing that combining is a good idea and to continue this. And then Suzanne's got her hand up. So go ahead, Suzanne.
I just have a quick question. Has there been any discussion about whether to create common verbiage across the state? Because we get a lot of students that move in to our district and they're coming from a district that calls things essential elements, but we call it DLM, and the parents are so confused. And is there any chatter about that, or is it just like we just need to have the discussion with parents of it's the same thing just called a different name?
Yeah, we don't have any, I guess, control or influence on like courses, for example. Is that what you're talking about? Or just like programming or
Yes.
yeah, we don't. That's all left up to LEAs. I mean, and in
Okay.
fact, every single district charter school can take any course code and slap whatever label they want on it.
Oh, interesting.
Yep, so they can change the names of those. So like that's why we ended up with we found a handful over the years where we've got those essential elements courses, right? Thinking that they were remedial courses. So I
Yeah.
mean, we don't have any kind of control over that piece of it. So yeah.
Okay.
So I think it's just kind of educating them when they land with you that this is kind of how we refer to or
Okay. But from the states and essential elements DLM, just same thing, different name.
Well,
well,
the dynamic learning maps essential elements are the alternate achievement standards for students
Right.
with a significant cognitive disability. So it is, I get that too a lot. People are like, oh, they're my DLM kids. And that, because I'm not, I mean, it's all part of the same thing, but I often think of essential elements as more of the instruction component. And when you hear DLM, that's the assessment they're taking. And I'm the instruction gal, so I like prefer alternate achievement standards for students with blah blah blah, you know, that are they called the essential elements. But so whenever Tracy, Lavinia, and I are putting out any kind of you know, technical assistance or professional learning, that's how we refer to it, but we don't have any control over, I mean, I know some districts refer to them as their level 3 kids. Like people are just calling it different things. So
Okay.
yeah.
So it's just a cat with a different name.
Yeah.
Okay.
that's a great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. Okay, so I think we've kind of wrapped up question number 1. So I think looking, you know, forward to next year, we will continue these. They'll just be kind of rolled into also 1% other topics, right? So look for flyers. We'll reach out to you to make sure you can get dates on the calendar once we determine those, probably this summer. And then the next question here is like, you know, is there a need that you see for more alternate diploma guidance? I mean, you've seen the guidance that we've updated, but you've also heard Tracy say that like there's not a whole lot more federal guidance around this, right? There is a fair bit of flexibility. So I don't know how much more like real tight guidance that like we can really provide, but are there opportunities also or needs for more professional learning around this? Maybe it's parent messaging or technical assistance. And of course, technical assistance can always be handled like through a phone call with us, right? Or an email, for example, or through this community of practice, certainly too. So given those considerations and that question, go ahead and, you know, respond, unmute if you'd like, or in the chat, or, you know, you can also think about this and let us know later as well. I'll just pause for a second and see if we've got any responses, and we're about at time.
I don't know if this is the right time to ask or even the right situation to ask, but with the changes in the guidelines to participate in the alternative core and diploma, those students that are no longer participating in EE that are not 2.5 standard deviations below the norm is what we're running into as we're having these conversations. They're going well, but I get the question often of what about transition services? Like, and so they're getting they're going to be on track for their regular diploma, but these students still might need those additional 4 years to really focus on work skills, life skills, and social skills. So how can we, do you have thoughts on how we can go about that or what to do?
Yeah, yes, that's a great question. Well, I think my first answer would be we need to start transition earlier, right? Because we always kind of think that transition or all of these skills have to happen after a student's senior year. But really, we need to start transition earlier. And I think really doing a lot of backwards planning, like where does the student want to be after they leave high school, and how do we make sure that they have some of those skills and experiences, and figuring out how do we embed those in a high school, day, essentially in a high school setting. Also accessing outside services earlier, right? Getting students connected with pre-employment transition services that can happen over the summer, can happen after school, for example, and sometimes during school. So I think what sometimes when we think, oh, a student needs post-high, in some ways we're just kind of prolonging or pushing out the transition services to just happen at the post-high setting. So I think, I know this is not like an easy, especially not an easy message, I think, to send to parents, but I think it will kind of challenge us all, I think, to really consider starting transition services early, and what does that really mean? And we have developed, well, first and foremost, we have a community of practice for early transition or middle school transition. And we also have a skills mapping tool where we recognize the skills that we want students to have upon exiting our system, but then we mapped those backwards all the way to preschool, actually. And so really kind of, I think, having conversations with parents and gen ed teachers and special educators that, like, we don't need to wait for transition. Like, that can be embedded, that can be, a lot of these things can be, these skills and experiences and more independence can happen sooner. I know that's not like a really like easy answer, but we don't want to do things like withhold credits, right? Those kinds of things we have to be careful of. If a student really is on path to earning a regular diploma and they don't need, I mean, there is always that option if they don't meet all those requirements by their senior year, that they could have that 5th year. So it's not if they can't earn the alternate diploma that they automatically go into a post-high. So I think it's also being a little bit more flexible in terms of how we think of post-high services. Sometimes I think we think post-high services are just for students that only can earn the alternate diploma, but that's not always the case. If students need more, time to complete their diploma requirements, then those post-high services can be, flexible in terms of the number of hours or number of days the student comes. It can be, a few hours a day, half days, a few days a week, that kind of thing. And then figuring out how we can embed what they need in terms of transition services along with the credit requirement as well. So I know this opens up a kind of a big can of worms, and we can talk offline a little bit more about this.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to hold folks back because we are at time. So we need you all to complete a evaluation or feedback, because we really do appreciate your feedback on all of our communities of practice and our professional learning opportunities. So if you would please take a minute to do that, we'd greatly appreciate it. And I'm not seeing anything in the chat at the moment. Oh yeah, the skills mapping too. I'll send it to you, Nick. Okay. Does that work?
I was gonna say, Nick, those are the
Yes,
exact
thank you.
conversations that need to happen in a 1%. Like, we need a 1%
Right.
community of practice, right? Like, those are the things everybody's kind of tangling with as we're thinking about this transition in the next year or so of these kiddos, for sure.
Tracy put that survey in the chat for you. And as Lavinia said, that is helpful to inform how we're doing and what we can do better or moving forward. So I mean, I missed the last session with you guys. I can't even remember why, but I just want to tell you all that I appreciate your efforts and all the work you're doing, and so many good like thoughts and suggestions on what you shared. That's literally what this is all about. This community of practice is us not telling you what to, it's you guys discussing what is and us giving you resources and giving each other resources. So anything else?
I don't think so, unless we have any last minute comments. We just really appreciate you all being here and participating. I think it's been a great discussion today. I look forward to continuing it next year.
Yep. And keep an eye out in speedometers or emails from Kim when we get some insights. So we'll get some of that mapped out for next year to keep things going.
Yeah. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, week, and
school year.
School year. Yes. For those of you that might get some time off coming soon.